All right. Good morning. All right. So today's interview, we are talking with Roy Orren. Roy is currently serving in the U.S. Army as Command Sergeant Major with the 44th Expeditionary Signal Battalion out of Germany. Roy came into 573 in summer of 2005 as the unit was being put together and getting ready for the first deployment to Iraq shortly after that. So, yeah, welcome, Roy. Thank you for talking with me. And yeah, tell me a little bit about your experiences coming into the unit, what you saw, and the process of putting things together.
Okay. So I've been in the Army for about 2 years. I joined the Army. I wanted to be a part of the infantry. So my first unit was the 319th down the
Hmm.
street in Devarty. And when I saw 573 Cav was being stood up and they were looking for people to kind of volunteer and be assessed to be there, I knew Charlie Troop was exactly where I wanted to be. So coming
Hmm.
in, um, I saw they had terrific leadership and amazing soldiers. And right off the bat, I felt like I was at home.
Yeah, one of the most interesting aspects for me with the way the unit was put together was that it was very much handpicked at the leadership level. There was a lot of money that came in. For people that don't know, 573 Cav was the first airborne RSTA unit ever put together for the 82nd Airborne, and as such, it was a test bed for all to come. The Army restructuring decided that they needed to have brigade level reconnaissance in every brigade, and it hadn't been done with airborne units before. So, we just had a clean slate for the leaders to pick their leaders and move on down from
Yep.
there.
No, absolutely.
What was your experience with that as things were put together? I know we had a very intense training schedule. Just starting a unit from the ground up is pretty intense as well. Do you have any kind of thoughts on that process and how that maybe shaped you as a leader moving on forward?
Yeah. So absolutely, right off the bat, the leaders that were in charge of me and took me under their wing were Mason Reap and Cody Burke, and they were unlike
Mm-hmm.
any other NCOs I'd ever met. And uh, absolutely, the things from their unique personalities and leadership that they forged into me were long lasting. And not only that, but like they are brothers to me for life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Having the leaders that were like that, followed with soldiers that I was serving with to my left and right, like Brandon Justice. You
Mm-hmm.
just have great peers and great leaders all around you.
Do you remember any kind of specific challenges that came up setting things up, and how maybe the leadership roles helped overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I would say overall, I remember Jason Leeworthy. He was the first sergeant at the
Mm-hmm.
time before we deployed. We had a company formation, and he told us that what we're going into is going to be hard. And he didn't know exactly what it was going to be like, but he was telling us like we weren't going to be living on fobs and it was going to be really rough. Like there's going to be a lot of combat. And to get ready for that, you don't know what you don't know until you've been through it. The training and what we did to prepare, because we didn't know what we were really prepared for, but more so the people in the unit and what combat brought out of them and their leadership is what carried all of us that are still in the Army to be the leaders they are throughout the time they were still in the Army and if they're in the Army today. And I think what's really unique about that is all the people that are still in the Army from Charlie Troop or 573 Cav as a whole have really gone pretty far. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of them are command sergeants, major, generals, uh, high up field grades, and battalion brigade commanders. And it's a testament to, I think, what was ingrained in us, not from just our combat experience, but the leaders that were in that combat experience with us and what it drew out of them. So I've yet to find another combat leader that has been through the things that we've been through. And then the ones that do know us are very much telling to me throughout my career that we went through something that was uncommon.
Yeah, I've always been amazed watching the careers of everyone that came out of 573. Just how much of Army leadership now is influenced by what happened in a little reconnaissance squadron almost 20 years ago at this point. And it's
Right.
been amazing to see. Like you were saying, it's hard to plan for what you don't know. So
Mhm.
I personally just recognized that, yeah, it was a lot of leadership and adaptability and listening to soldiers. Paratrooper units are incredibly diverse, and they're also incredibly adaptable by nature. You never know who's going to be with you when you land, should you have to do, a parachute insertion. And
Right.
it seemed like our leadership really took that to heart by being adaptable leaders more than stuck in a doctrine.
Right. No, I'll tell you that forged something in me for the rest of my career, that you're making decisions not so much based off the book, but based off of common sense and what's going to
Mm-hmm.
keep people alive and what's going to accomplish the mission. So being able to think outside the box, think on your feet, have, wide open left and right limits. I would say we were practicing mission command better than anyone before mission
Mm-hmm.
command was even potentially a doctrinal term to control back then.
No, I was incredibly surprised as soon as we got in. We started doing combat outposts and small unit engagements. We way before the surge was implemented, we were doing surge policies. It's because we had leaders that were able to be adaptable and take things from everywhere. We had leaders that came from special forces, from ranger regiments. It was just a really good mix at the time and place, and just seemed to coincide really well with the younger troops. It was a really good training session for everyone that started off there.
Yeah, I think I've never been in a unit that had a density of just the most just good leaders. I mean, the mindset of those leaders were unremarkable. The
Mm-hmm.
way they led, you don't have that typically in a unit. And then you add the things that we went through, and they still maintain that and shined even more.
Exactly. One of the interesting topics that's come up in these discussions is the the concept of leadership in the military is a little bit different than the corporate world, because in the military you don't have a chance to say no to orders. So the people that are giving orders absolutely recognize that. So it takes a different kind of leader to listen to their subordinates, to be flexible and adaptable, well, the whole while knowing that what they say goes regardless of their decision. It's a special kind of person that can take that kind of authority, but also allow other people to have input and flexibility.
Uh, competency, competency. That was the word
Mm-hmm.
I was searching for a moment ago. Uh, I can't think of a single leader that was incompetent. We just had
Mm-hmm.
the greatest leaders that I've ever seen in an organization. And a part of that was the standards that we had. A squad leader and above was ranger qualified. You were a jump master.
Mm-hmm.
You had to be put through certain trials and tribulations to prove yourself and to be in those positions.
Yeah, I really found that interesting. Even with our junior enlisted, there was individuals that had issues before we deployed, and they were given a second chance. They were given options to continue to deploy should they wish, but there were also always conditions with it, and the conditions were about becoming a better person, a better soldier, and a better team member. And I've always incorporated those lessons into how I treat people as well in the business world.
Yeah, for me, in the military world, still actually using UCMJ as a rehabilitation tool. Um,
Mm-hmm.
can you get better from it, or do you just write people off? And I will say during that time in the 82nd back then, a lot of times behind door number one was your field grade and maxed out. But it was the leaderships that did the leadership below that level that did the damage control to look at you as a human being first and use you for the most of your talent and potential.
Mm-hmm. And I think that built loyalty as much as anything, because
Oh,
you trusted your leaders were watching and they knew you as a person.
you had leaders that knew you in that organization
Mm-hmm.
at a personal level. Yeah, I remember I we had to have had the only battalion command team that was actually in combat with us. And out of nowhere, they
Yes.
would show up on the objective with bullets flying, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, boy, you made staff sergeant, good job, and throw it on your chest. And you're like, holy shit, there's the battalion commander.
Yeah.
As a CSM, we get down with a firefight and he
Mm-hmm.
walked up, and you're like, oh man, CSM was right there. You didn't have that. In fact, at a FOB warhorse at the time, a lot of people were leaving the FOB
Mm-hmm.
while we were living amongst the populace. So we had uncommon leadership. at the top levels as well. We had GOs that were showing up at our
Yes.
patrol. People that I've watched throughout their entire careers until retirement. Yeah, they were heroes for a reason to us because they were combat leaders.
Yeah, I distinctly remember several situations where out during Turkey 1, we had a very tough fight out in open fields with deep
Yeah.
trenches and vegetation that the insurgency was using as cover. And it was a very large, for people that don't know and weren't there, it was a very large terrorist training camp that we'd stumbled into and developed a very large battle from it, almost unexpectedly. But right in the middle of all of that, I remember seeing Colonel Pappas and Ray Edgar, Sergeant Major Ray Edgar, standing there working radios, talking comms, overseeing medevacs for Denison and spacing the name, unfortunately, the two gentlemen who were lost their lives. Yeah. So they were doing medevacs, they were coordinating CAS, and they were also doing battle maneuvers with the ground elements all at the same time, and they were in the middle of it. They weren't back behind lines. That was always incredibly impressive. And I distinctly remember, unfortunately, during the Baqubah suicide bombing, when we took casualties, during the Kazovac and collection of bodies afterwards, Lieutenant Colonel Pappas was out there with us, looking to us and talking to us and seeing exactly what was happening. And like you said, I don't want to cast shade on other units, so I won't name names, but yeah, out of Warhorse, we saw other units that would refuse to leave, refuse to engage the enemy, refuse to take risks. And just as a team, seeing that our leaders were with us, it pushed you way further than you normally would go.
Yeah, and we adapted and overcame. If you're going to get blown up by a truck, then we'll go by dismount. And we started inserting with helicopters and following the intel from village to village. I mean, I went to Ranger School after both deployments, the 15-month and 12-month, and being a staff sergeant after being through 27 months of combat with Charlie Troop, Ranger School, I was like, hey guys, these are just Ranger games. Like, calm down, So the constant high off tempo and not knowing if you're going to live from day to day, but accepting that and the brotherhood that you were surrounded by, and doing it because of the people to the left and right of you is what really made that unit special and forged us. And it made a lot of us. Unfortunately, it broke some of us too. The people that are still in the Army, I think they made it to where they got to because of our experiences. I think they're uncommon experiences, especially for our generation. And the people that got out, they've gone on to do great things as well. And speaking of people that it's kind of broke us, I've gone through hard times from things too. And looking back at that, you were talking about Turkey Village, Canal 10, up in Canal 10, with Charlie Troop during the engagement you were talking about. And you got to hold on to those things for a long time because you are a leader and you have to take care of soldiers. But it catches up to you eventually. But people like Ray Edgar devoting their life afterwards and to taking care of people like us, it's terrific. So if you're watching this and you're one of those unit members that could be struggling, reach out to Ray Edgar, reach out to another Task Force 300 brother, reach out to somebody and get some help because hopefully it makes you stronger, the things that we've been through.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that a little bit later, but since you've brought it up already, leadership doesn't end with your military service.
Right.
In your experience, what advice would you have for leaders both and people that need help afterwards, just coming to terms with the fact that you need help and being able to seek it out?
I think the first part of it is you don't really know that you need help until you know.
Yes.
It's not just self-awareness, but it's instilled in us through the hardship that we've been through to put one foot in front of the other, and it's not about you, it's about everyone else, and then it translates to your personal life too. So everything's a mission, so you don't have time to take care of yourself. So whether it's in the training environment, whether it's in other deployments, take care of soldiers or take care of your family, you kind of put yourself on the back burner when you're forged in that kind of fire. But then recognizing are you being the person that you want to be for your soldiers, your peers, your leaders, your family, and so on? Who they deserve you to be and who you want to be for them. And having that self-reflection and realizing, if you're having a hard time, for me, I was a first sergeant in the Ranger Regiment the first time I went to behavioral health. And I was like, hey, I'm here to get an appointment. And the sergeant looked at me and he goes, oh, are you here for one of your soldiers? And right there, I wanted to just walk out. And like, oh, yeah, I'll come back later. And that was kind of the introduction, is to have the courage that, go and talk to somebody. And then from there, I just started spreading it to all my soldiers. Okay, I go to behavioral health. You need help, go get it. Kind of fight that stigma. But then, you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for your family. You're doing it for your household and the atmosphere that revolves around you. And then that you're not alone. And that was, I guess, circling back to the beginning, what I said. For me, and for a lot of the people that were in Task Force 300, our peer group is older. So, going to either leaders that are still in the Army or, your peers in the civilian world at this point that don't have a clue in what you went through, being able to reach back for me as a command sergeant major to another command sergeant major like Ray Edgar and say, man, this is how I see things through my lens and how I feel. And for him to completely understand it and be able to see it through the same lens has been very helpful for me. So you got to reach out, but you got to reach out to the right people, because it's also easy to call behavioral health when they say there's a bunch of people in front of you and then be like, well, I tried, and hang up the phone. So supportive family members help too.
Yeah, I was very impressed with how Ray has gone on to help soldiers that are still suffering. It's leadership beyond your leadership role. Just because your time in the military ends doesn't mean your time as a leader ends, and that extends to families as well. I think a lot of people that get out of the military don't necessarily look at their families as being part of their team. Leaders at every level as well. Speaking of the mental health challenges, when we came back in 2007, my section leader, so he was E5 at the time, but section leader, he grabbed the section and took us into behavioral health at Fort Bragg to try and get us mental health help. And he said, look, you don't realize it yet, but you do have PTSD. You have readjustment issues. And he started the ball rolling, and that's E5. It doesn't take someone at the top of the chain to do it. Every person on the way down, just like on the battlefield, every paratrooper has to know everyone else's job. Everyone else needs to look after their friends and family too.
Yeah, I'll say, I think a starting point for me, when Joe Duran passed, that was a shocking point for me. Everyone else that had passed while we were out doing combat operations obviously impacted me, but you kind of mentally have this thought that, well, it's combat. You can make an excuse for it mentally. It's combat and there's a reason why it happened, even though I don't completely understand. You can kind of have expectations that people are going to die in the scenarios that we were in. But when Joan died, it hit me really hard, because it's not supposed to be him. It wasn't supposed to be our escort section. It wasn't supposed to be our company XO. I just oddities that, they probably don't teach in any school in the military, But Joan hit me hard because within my squad, I had all the commodities, a Charlie troop for my team. And immediately I felt like I couldn't feel. I had to shove it down, and I had to take care of my team. And I didn't cry. I didn't feel any emotion. This was one of my best friends, and all I could think of is I have to take care of the other soldiers in my squad and be strong for them. And I shoved it down so hard, I really didn't start having real feelings again in life until probably about 2017. And then those feelings were kind of control. And I was like, oh man, I'm getting feelings back, but I can't really control it. Still didn't think that I had PTSD or anything like that. It was actually this year I was diagnosed and started getting treatment for it. You continue to go in this fast-paced life and in consistent leadership roles because you're worried about taking care of everyone else but yourself.
Yeah, and it will eat at you if you don't get the help. I know it took me about 10 years to really come to terms with things and start seeking, counseling and other psychological help with it. Um, I actually did a second deployment specifically because of that. I came home and did some guard time, and I found out they were deploying less than a year after we had come back, and I volunteered and I said I have to go back. And part of that I recognized was my emotional state at the time was so locked down into a mission oriented thing that it became my mission. Iraq became my personal mission. But also, just to dovetail back to what you were talking about a few minutes ago about people not knowing what you went through, especially as time goes on. That's one reason I really enjoy doing these interviews, and I'd like to continue doing them, because I really do think it's important to tell soldiers' stories, what they've been through, who they've connected with, and especially the part about who we have connected with, who our leadership was, who we feel. But yeah, just those relationships and how they keep us together and keep us healthy as we move forward. So I really, because Ray told me this was actually your idea to do these interviews, and I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah. So my thought, I'm out here in Germany, and when I saw the colors were casing, it was pretty impactful, and I haven't really dealt
Yeah.
with that emotion just yet because the unit mate, it
Yes.
really forged who I am and everything that I've done for, I don't know, I've been in 21 years now. That was 2 years in the Army. So, for 19 years since, starting in Charlie Troop, my motivation and everything that I've done has been uncommon in every unit that I've been to. I went to, I went to 5th RTB, the Ranger Training Battalion, follow Brandon Justice. Because I wanted that security blanket of having someone I was close to when I was leaving the unknown of the 82nd for the first time. And I was like, man, I think I can take a breath and like enjoy life. And it's not that I didn't enjoy life. There's a different type of enjoyment of the type of unit we were in. You enjoyed the stuff. You enjoyed the pride of I'm a paratrooper, and not just any paratrooper. I'm a 3rd Brigade paratrooper. I'm a 573 Cav paratrooper, and I'm a Charlie Troop paratrooper. Like there's just so much pride instilled by the terrific leaders that you wanted to aspire to be. My whole reasoning of my career was to be a first sergeant in 82nd. I would be proud to retire. But to the point to where when I made sergeant major, I was like, I don't know what to do with my life. Yeah. But I followed Brandon to 5th RTB and then realized I had a huge passion sharing my experiences and trying to influence those Ranger students in something that I felt like I had to share, which was experience as a leader. And then going to my first signal unit, being a signaler, going to my first signal unit in JCSE in Tampa, Florida, training them. And then those leaders asking me like, where do you come up with this? And what motivates you to think like this? And for me, it was always not having blood in my head. Like if you're not doing the training that you need to be doing to go into the experiences you can potentially go in your most likely and your most deadly courses of action, and you're not doing your job. So as a sergeant first class in that unit, I was very uncommon as a leader in that unit. Going on to be a first sergeant in the 112 Signal Battalion and in the Ranger Regiment, as a first sergeant, you're the master trainer of the company. And the things that I did to prepare and ready those companies and those organizations were uncommon to the leaders I worked with there in USASOC. But I had leaders when I got to the Ranger Regiment who knew about us. Rob Shaw, he's a hero of mine. He was my battalion commander. And Kurt Donaldson, my command sergeant major in the STB and 75th Ranger Regiment, they knew of us and they knew of the combat we went through and the things that we did. And Kurt Donaldson had told me, so don't ever feel like you don't have what it takes to be here in the Ranger Regiment as a first sergeant, because no one that you're leading has ever been through anything that you've been through. And I didn't understand at the time. But as I got to know my soldiers and realized like they're young kids, and they had not been through the things that we had gone through. I had so much to offer them. And it was just been my life's mission. And now as a command sergeant major, everything I do is for the soldiers in my battalion to be ready for us in Europe
Hmm.
Eventually the next big conflict. So it's
Yeah.
shaped my life and everything I do and my motivation for every soldier in readiness.
Yeah, I love seeing how many former 573 troopers have gone on to train other individuals. Like Ty Copeland, talking to him yesterday, he's now training the newest range of intel analysts that are coming up.
Okay.
I love seeing those experiences and it's organizational memory, things within an organization, the policies, procedures, the leadership, and all those other little aspects get passed from generation to generation, and it builds a stronger unit. Especially where you're at right now with politics the way they are, Europe is becoming a brand new theater where no one knows what's going on. And so those kind of leadership examples are needed now more than ever. And you're in a great place for it. So we're
Yeah,
almost
I
out
like
of
it.
time. Oh,
Uh, well, if
sorry, I
we're
don't want to
almost
step
out
on
of
you.
time, I do want to throw some shout outs out there.
Yeah, go
Um,
ahead.
so, I kind of wrote some stuff because I didn't know what it was going to be like for our interview. But yeah, just to name a few, and I'm sorry for anyone who's watching if I leave anyone out. But these are some people about 10 minutes before our interview I kind of jotted down that had
Mhm.
immense impacts in my life. Um, but Cody Burke, Mason Reap, John Coomer, Johnny Carson, Jesse Stewart, Brennan Justice, Roy Mitchell, Wesley Hodges, Jeffrey Lohr, Robert Cobb, Joan Duran, Brett Lawrence, Taylor Williams, Jabril Kamara, Kyle Bell, Jared Williams, Daniel Sinclair, Corey Maples, Robert Frame, Ray Edgar, Donnie Workman, Raul Cantu, Willie Lilly, Rhett Schiller, John Nakana, Corey Kroll, Rick Kelly, Pete Johnson, Brad Rather, Rich Norfleet, Zach Kay, Jeffrey Black, Isaac Wentz, Selma Figueroa, and of course Andrew Pappas, just to name a
Mhm.
few. I carry all these people with me and everything that they've forged in me and instilled in me, and they made me who I am. So, I'm proud to have served with them. I keep in contact with a lot of them still. And if you're watching, you guys are my heroes and the reason why I still do the things that I do today.
That's great. We've got a little over 2 minutes. Do you have a quick, like, a fun memory, a cherished memory, something that always makes you smile when you think of it?
Well, there's definitely a lot of fun memories that I cherish. I don't know if they're
Hmm.
appropriate to share.
Yeah,
With
exactly right.
I'll tell you, there's been a lot of short halts where Cody Burke would come up and tap on my
Mhm.
window, and I'd open my door, and he'd share what was on his mind, and it would be the highlight of my day. Uh, but yeah, or some one-liners from Taylor Williams or Brennan Justice from a gun turret. Uh, yeah, I mean, there's definitely singing songs with Johnny Carson. Uh, Go to war songs, and ACDC songs and stuff. So yeah, that there's a lot of terrific memories. Um, I didn't prepare to politically correct share them.
Yeah. No, I know the same. When I first got out and joined my other unit, I started telling stories every once in a while before you realize how unique your experience was, and I think I horrified some people. So yeah. Yeah. So about 1 minute left. Any final words?
Just for all of you that were in Task Force 300, you're my forever family. I lived for you then, I would die for you then, and I would die for you now. So
Well, thank
that's
you very much for speaking with me, and please don't die for us, live for us. Actually, I think that should be the message out of all of it is,
right.
as we transition life and get older, it's time to live for us, for our families, and for all the teammates, and especially for the ones that didn't make it back.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you at a reunion one of these days.
All right, brother. Thank you so much for taking the time and doing this.